A billionaire father notices a black waitress feeding his paralyzed son and changes her life forever. In the relentless rush of New York City, where dreams often drift away like the morning fog, a simple act of kindness breaks through the noise. Marissa, a quiet waitress barely seen by the world around her, makes a choice that will ripple far beyond the cafe's tables. What begins as a small gesture toward a boy ignored by those meant to care for him soon draws her into a world of wealth and power, challenging her to stand tall where few expect her to. This is not a tale of rescue, but one of dignity recognized at last. Before dawn, the city was still draped in its darkest blue, the streets damp with the faint scent of rain from the night before. Marissa slipped out of the cramped apartment she shared with her mother and little sister, careful not to wake them. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her worn shoes, and she paused a moment to glance back at the sleeping figures. Her mother's face lined with fatigue, her sister clutching a tattered doll. She left a small envelope on the kitchen table, faded bills folded inside, the last few dollars from her paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was all she could give. Outside, the cold air nipped at her cheeks, the city slowly stirring awake. The distant hum of traffic grew louder as she made her way to the cafe near Manhattan, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the sharp tang of exhaust. Marissa had been working at Fairfield's for almost 2 years. The cafe was bustling by the time she arrived, the clatter of cups and the murmur of early customers filling the space. She moved quietly behind the counter, the weight of exhaustion settling deep in her bones. The low hum of conversation buzzed past her ears as if she were invisible, just another shadow in the stream. Her manager, a man with a clipped voice and a permanent scowl, barked orders from across the room. "Keep it moving, Marissa. If you're not up for it, there's a line waiting to take your spot." She nodded without looking up, wiping down the counter with practiced motions. The chatter of co-workers felt hollow, their eyes barely meeting hers. "You okay?" one of them asked once, then quickly turned away when she didn't respond. During a rare break, Marissa retreated to the back room where the dim light filtered through a dusty window. She pulled out a worn book, its spine cracked, pages soft from years of use. It was a textbook on neuropsychology, something she had once dreamed of mastering. She traced her fingers over the words, remembering late nights at NYU before her father died, and the scholarship slipped away with him. The quiet comfort of the book soothed her. For a moment, the noise of the cafe seemed miles away. Later, when the afternoon sun warmed the terrace outside, her gaze caught a small scene through the glass door. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sat silently in a wheelchair, his pale hands resting on his lap. His face was fragile and still, like porcelain, and he wore an expression that seemed to carry more weight than his years. A nurse hovered nearby, but her attention was elsewhere, scrolling through her phone with one hand while the other loosely held a tray of food. The boy's feeding tubes and monitors beeped faintly, but no one seemed to notice when the devices slipped and clattered to the ground. Marissa's heart clenched. She couldn't look away. Something about the boy's quiet hunger, not just for food, but for care, stirred something deep inside her. She took a breath and stepped outside. "Let me help," she said softly, pulling a chair close to the boy's side. Her hands moved gently, lifting a spoonful of food to his lips. The boy's eyes flickered to hers for the first time that day, and she smiled, a small, steady smile full of unspoken promises. "You're not the one they forget," she whispered, wiping a stray crumb from his cheek. Inside, the manager spotted her and stormed out. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was low but sharp. "You know who that is? You broke every rule we have." Marissa swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "He was hungry," she said quietly. Rules are rules. If you want to keep this job, you follow them. He turned and left, leaving a cold silence in his wake. Back inside, whispers floated around the tables. Just a waitress. Thinks she's better than the rest. The words stung, but Marisa held her ground, the memory of the boy's eyes steadying her. At the end of her shift, she gathered the leftover tips and a few unopened sandwiches, slipping them into a small bag. Walking home, the city noise seemed louder now, the honk of horns, the slap of shoes on pavement. But inside, a quiet warmth bloomed. Her sister greeted her with a hopeful smile. "Did you get enough?" the girl asked. Marisa knelt down, brushing her hand over the child's hair. "Enough for tonight," she said, "and a little extra for tomorrow." That night, the phone rang in the cafe. Marisa was already home, her feet sore and body weary. The manager answered, voice clipped and nervous. "Yes, her name is Marisa. Why?" A few hours later, a sharply dressed man appeared at the cafe's entrance. His suit was crisp, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He carried an air of quiet authority as he asked to speak with Marisa. She felt the weight of 1,000 eyes as she was led to an office, walls lined with expensive art and soft lighting that seemed foreign after the harsh fluorescence of Fairfield's. "Mr. Wessler," the man introduced himself without looking up from his phone. "I'm Andrew. Your kindness did not go unnoticed." Marissa's heart hammered. "I didn't do anything special." He paused, then said, "You weren't supposed to do anything at all, so why?" She met his eyes, steady despite the doubt swirling inside her. "Because it was right." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. Then Andrew Wessler closed his phone, the hardness in his expression softening just a little. Andrew Wessler's office smelled of polished leather and faint cedar. Outside, the city buzzed with relentless urgency. But inside, time seemed to slow, thick with unspoken tension. Marissa sat on the edge of a sleek chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Andrew's gaze rarely left his phone, tapping quietly, his expression unreadable. "You really weren't supposed to do that," he said finally, voice low and controlled. "Why?" Marissa shrugged, her eyes flickering with a mixture of irritation and something harder to place. "I wasn't hired to ignore a hungry kid. He needed help. It wasn't about rules." Andrew leaned back, fingers steepled. "Rules exist for a reason. You think you can just walk into a world like this and change it with a spoonful of food?" She looked at him steadily. "Maybe not. But I can't stand by and watch someone invisible suffer." An assistant entered quietly, breaking the silence. "Mr. Wessler, we have the report on the school accommodations for Oliver." Andrew glanced up sharply. "Thanks, Lisa." He turned to Marissa. "You understand what you're up against? This isn't charity. It's business, control, power." Marissa bit her lip. "I know. But Oliver's isolation isn't just a problem for him. It's a failure of the system." Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly. "You call it a system. I call it a network of carefully managed fears." Marissa stiffened but kept her voice steady. "Fear doesn't justify neglect." The room grew colder. Andrew's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it but didn't pick up. "I'm offering you something," he said after a long pause. "A position. To care for Oliver, not just as a nurse, but as his advocate. You'd have a place to live, insurance, a salary, a chance to change things from within." Marissa's eyes narrowed. "And what's the catch?" "No catch. Just don't expect the world to bend overnight. She shook her head. I don't work for handouts. If you want to help, put money into my sister's school for medical books. Let her have a chance. Andrew studied her, surprise flickering in his eyes. You're more than a waitress, aren't you? She didn't answer immediately. The memory of the NYU campus, lectures on cognitive science, late nights studying haunted her. Her father's death had ripped the future from her hands. Why quit? He pressed. I didn't, she said quietly. Life quit me. Andrew was silent for a moment. The armor around his expression cracked just slightly. I'll look into it. Later, Marissa visited the hospital wing where Oliver stayed. The nurses were polite but distant. One in particular, a woman with a tight smile and sharp eyes, barely looked up from her clipboard. Marissa watched Oliver carefully. The boy's eyes darted to the window, to the sounds beyond the room, desperate for connection. Hey, Oliver, Marissa said softly, moving closer. You don't have to stay silent. Oliver's lips parted. You see me? Marissa nodded. I do. The nurse frowned. Marissa, please, this isn't your job. It is if no one else is doing it. That night, Marissa confronted the school principal about Oliver's limited participation. The man's face was set, unyielding. Nobody's listening. It's not our problem. Marissa clenched her fists, swallowing the frustration that threatened to spill. It's everyone's problem when a child is left out. Outside, Oliver whispered to her, voice barely audible. You're the first who didn't pity me. Tears pricked her eyes. For the first time, the silence between them felt like hope. News outlets caught wind of the story. Headlines twisted it into something else. A waitress vying for Billionaire's attention. Marissa read the articles, bitter and cold. Andrew stepped in, addressing the press. She didn't ask for help. She gave it. Sometimes that's the hardest thing. Marissa glanced up, surprised by the rare warmth in his voice. Oliver spoke quietly one afternoon to his father. With her, I live. With the others, I just breathe. Andrew's silence spoke volumes. The line between power and compassion blurred. The office was quiet, except for the soft hum of the city far below the high-rise windows. Andrew Wessler sat behind his polished desk, fingers loosely clasped as he stared at the framed photo of his son, Oliver. The boy's bright eyes seemed to pierce through the glass, filled with a longing Andrew had never fully understood until now. Marissa stood near the door, her posture cautious but steady. The air between them held the weight of all the moments they'd shared. Silent battles, unspoken truths, and a fragile trust slowly growing. Oliver said something. Andrew began, his voice low. He told me, with her, I live. With the others, I just breathe. Marissa's eyes softened. He means it. He's never had anyone see him like that before. Andrew nodded, the tightness around his eyes easing. I want you to help us. Not just Oliver, but others like him. I'm offering you a role as an advisor for our foundation, working to improve care for children with special needs. Marissa hesitated, the offer tempting but unfamiliar. If I do this, it has to be on my terms. I want a team, programs that support families without billions behind them. Andrew met her gaze, respect shining through. Agreed, no compromises. The days that followed brought change, slow and uneven but real. A pilot program launched, designed to provide informal support for mothers and families overlooked by the system. Marissa worked alongside therapists, educators, and volunteers, her voice growing stronger as she advocated for those who had long been silenced. At the hospital, the nurse who had once ignored Oliver's needs was replaced by a woman recommended by Marissa, someone who listened, who cared with a quiet empathy that made a difference. Back at Fairfields, the cafe where it all began, Marissa stepped inside. The familiar scents of coffee and baked bread filled the air, but the faces around her were different now. Her old manager stared, disbelief flickering across his features. "Do you know who she is?" a new employee whispered. Marissa smiled, calm and unshaken. "I do." Later, she returned to the small apartment, the worn book on neuropsychology resting on a shelf. She opened it carefully, sliding a bookmark between the pages where she'd left off so long ago. The words felt alive now, not just dreams, but a future in reach. On the school stage, Oliver stood before a room filled with teachers, parents, and students. His voice was steady as he spoke about the woman who saw him, not as a burden, but as a person. The crowd rose, applause filling the hall. Tears welled in Marissa's eyes, warmth blossoming in her chest. At home, Marissa held the keycard to the foundation's office, the symbol of a new path. She handed it to her little sister, whose eyes shone with hope. "Now," Marissa said softly, "it's your turn to be seen." The city lights shimmered through the window, a quiet promise hanging in the air, of change, of recognition, and of lives forever touched by a simple act of kindness.